Rick, Rick Chen from Blind. Oh my God, I'm so glad we're talking today. This is nuts. Meta laid off by 11,000 people. It's huge. Now, I want to be respectful because no one wants to lose their job, but we're in new territory. And dude, you and Blind are the epicenter of like what's going on. So tell us what's happening, what's going on behind the scenes.
Right. I think what is really interesting about this and why we had to come together for the special like edition emergency
Oh, right,
podcast
right,
of the
right.
blind ambition is it's 13% of their total staff, right? And so Meta before this layoff, before this morning, we should say, was at about 87,000 people. And 13%, 1-3, it's huge. And you have to also think about it in the context of Meta itself. When it was Facebook, um, 18 years, the culture of Meta or Facebook has been not to do any layoffs. It's always been, hey, if a team or project doesn't work out, we're going to reorg that team and help you find another job within the company. Like, we're going to do everything we can to avoid layoffs. And
Why would
so
they do that though? Is that just hubris that like they feel like, hey, we're Facebook, we could do everything. And if we lay off just one person, it's gonna make us look weak. And we're not weak and we're strong. So we're gonna just keep is that the mentality?
I mean, I wouldn't say it's this like
Yeah.
hubris, but
Yeah.
I would even go as far as saying it's a bit of a humility thing, right? I mean, you've written about this for Forbes so much,
Yeah.
but companies spent a lot of time recruiting
Yeah.
and training. And so perhaps it's hubris in the sense that they have such confidence in their recruitment process that, like, hey, you've passed our quote unquote bar. You're the great talent that you need. In many cases, we've invested time training you. Hey, this project didn't work out, but you're still part of the team, you're still part of the family. Let's find you somewhere else to do because we know you can excel. So perhaps it's
That makes sense.
hubris of your team's capability.
Right, right. There. So like we're so great at spotting talent and we're so great at interviewing. So that if you're here, that means you have to be awesome. And why would we lay you off? Because you're awesome. So in a bizarre way, it makes sense. But let me ask you this: like, didn't there come a point where somebody would say to Mark, and I know, so I'm first name is base with it, so I could call Mark. So with Mark to say, hey, dude, you have 87,000 plus people working there. You invested like a gazillion dollars. I don't know how many billions in the metaverse. Like maybe just chill out a little bit, pull back for the metaverse, take it easy. Do you think a lot of it was like the metaverse? And do you think also a lot of it was TikTok eating their lunch?
I think I would even go as far as saying it's just it's two things, right? It is just part of just so focused on like selling ads, right? Like their revenue, like credit to Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook and Meta for finding the cash cow that is the Facebook pixel, and that is targeting ads and like basically modern day quote unquote performance marketing, right? But Apple really killed the advertising industry, and it really killed Facebook in particular, right? In terms of letting iOS users, which within tech companies tend to be the most coveted, because iOS users tend to be the most kind of tech savvy or the most like sought after demographic because they're younger and they tend to have a higher income compared to Android users. Um, Apple making this software update that lets users kind of opt out of not sharing their data really killed this marketing profession, right? So suddenly people can't figure out, okay, well, I'm spending a few $100s or even thousands of dollars on Facebook. I can't see how successful my campaign is going because my spend is because I don't have that data. Maybe it's on a delay. maybe it's a guess, maybe your figures of like, oh, your campaign, Rick, before was, you were getting people to download your app for $5. Your cost per install was $5, which is great. Now, because they're not getting that data, maybe your cost per install is going up to like 7, 8, even $10. And from an advertiser perspective, you're like, oh no, my marketing campaign got 40, 50, 100% less efficient, right? I'm going to pull back my spend. Maybe Facebook isn't as efficient as I thought it'd be. And so that Apple privacy has really killed them.
Now, do you think it's because of the regulations about privacy, or Tim Cook comes across as this nice guy, but maybe inside he's just a maniac and he just wanted to cut Zuckerberg off at the legs. And he's like, I'm gonna just take you out, buddy. That's it. I'm done with you. What do you think? It's a little bit of both, or no? It's just like the new rules came in, it's a new type of era, and that's what it is.
I mean, you're not wrong. There's a conspiracy theory.
It's
I'll be graceful and call it that Apple wants the piece of the advertising business, right? Like they've been expanding beyond, iPhone manufacturing. People are upgrading their phones less. Their phones are costing way more. And so they're doing things like iCloud, right? If I can get everyone to subscribe for $1 a month and I have a billion, you know, iPhone users, that's $1 billion a month, like and that's free revenue basically for them, right?
oh,
And
so
you
he
know,
could say like, no, I don't want to hurt your business
no,
model,
I care
Facebook.
about privacy.
It's privacy is so important to us. Meanwhile, they get a 30% cut of everything. So, well, that's a coincidence, but okay.
Right. And they get the PR credit of saying, oh, I'm doing good by the consumer.
Right.
And also they get to sell their own ads, right? if
Yeah.
if if people are blocking um you know third parties from using it, well, they're not a third party, they're the first party. They own the device, you're doing it in their ecosystem. They suddenly are the only ones that can target iOS
So is it gloves
consumers.
off now? Because it seemed to me from the outside, right? As a layman, as a novice looking at the outside, that the big tech, players had this kind of truce. Like we all have our little zones and we're not going to encroach on it. And it feels like the gloves are off now and everything is getting, is that what's happening?
You're not wrong. So a few years ago, there was a Wall Street Journal article that actually discovered two things. One is a lot of these big tech companies, Apple, Google, Facebook among them, had a truce about not necessarily poaching each other's employees. Like, I mean, obviously it happens. We see it all the time on Blind. There's a lot of employees that are moving among that kind of big tech echelon of companies. But they had kind of this almost like price fixing, almost like working like a OPEC cartel kind of
But you
thing.
can't do, wait, is that illegal, or it's just, there's ways to just kind of get around it?
Yeah, well, so the journal article, and it was a few years ago, so
Right.
I might have to reread it to
Yeah.
refresh, but it was kind of a gentleman's agreement,
Right.
right? It wasn't like written explicitly. And then the second thing is, Google pays Apple, I believe, $1 billion or more to be the default search engine on Safari on everyone's iPhone, right? And so they're doing exactly like you're saying. They're carving up different spaces.
Yeah.
They have these like grand agreements and partnerships between them. I mean, this is why we call it big tech, right?
Yeah.
It's like big tobacco. It's like big whatever.
It's what's the mood? What's the vibe on Blind now? Like, are people freaking out? Not just Meta people, but everyone else, because what I'm seeing, just in my own humble opinion from covering this kind of stuff, it seems this is the trend that, for people who are listening, just to give you some wonky stuff, right? So bear with me. I'll be really, I won't be so bad about this. The Fed basically screwed up. they're like, oh, it's transitory inflation. Oh, no worries. They're completely wrong. And inflation just rocketed. And now they're like, holy shit, we effed up. We got to do something about it. So now they're raising interest rates. When you raise like Facebook, Google, Apple, all these companies got free money for years and years and years. So do the investment banks. So they could just hire like crazy. They could do whatever they want because they have so much money. Now, if you're going to have interest rates at 5%, that changes the game. It changes the game for startups, for everything else, because now you can't just, hire like crazy, build like crazy. You have to have enough money coming in to pay, that 5% or so. Then you have to pay the debt back. Plus you have to have profits on top of it. So all of a sudden, this is why I think we're going to see lots of layoffs now, because the game is different now. It's no free lunch anymore. Does that make sense? Is that?
I think you're exactly right. I think it's a changing calculus in terms of also like what Wall Street investors are willing to tolerate in terms of it goes back to what you were saying at the start of the podcast, at the start of the hour. Uh, are investors going to be willing to wait or subsidize these huge capital costs of, I'm going to build the metaverse and it's going to cost me $5-10 billion, um and maybe they're just becoming impatient and saying, actually, we're the shareholders of the company, that capital does belong to us, we want you to allocate it in a different way.
And it's down 70% year to date.
Right.
70%
Yeah,
year to
7-0.
date. 7-0. That's huge. So and to go back before I gave my little rant about like how, the Fed's trying to screw, just messed up. But anyway, so how's the vibe check there? Like, are people really freaking out? Are they just do they get already used to it because we've already been seeing so many layoffs and hire freezes, or this one is like hit home hard?
It's all of the above.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the first thing that has really shocked folks is the scale,
Yeah.
right? So, 87,000. There were talks in the last few days that, oh my gosh, could it be 10%? Would Mark Zuckerberg cut 10%? No way. That's almost 10,000 people,
Yeah.
right? That's
Yeah.
8.7 thousand, right? No way. And today it ended up being 13. Yeah, it ended up being more than 10,000.
And it doesn't mean they'll stop here. I mean, he didn't say he'll fire more, but he didn't say he won't. So
that's the thing. But there's also a group, this reminds me of, I believe it was April 2020. It was the start of the COVID-19 pandemic layoffs, right? And we had Airbnb come out. They were hit hard by the shelter in place, the lockdowns, the stay at home. Like, no one's traveling anymore. And this was before people figured out how to work remotely and, get a backyard and that kind of thing. And Airbnb, their revenue basically went to zero. They had to do layoffs. But the way that they decided to do layoffs, they were applauded around the tech industry for having a really generous severance plan.
Yeah.
No surprise there. Their employee benefits that they were going to extend to their now alumni, the laid off folks, right? Career support, health insurance for an extra 6 months, getting some of your, stock grants, even though you don't work there, for a few months after. And we're seeing Meta do the same thing.
Exactly.
Right?
I don't know if you read my piece because I wrote today.
Yeah.
And I alluded to it, but what's so funny? So the knock on Zuckerberg is that he kind of copies everything or steals everything. So he took Brian Chesky, right? It's right. Brian Chesky's playbook. Exactly what you're saying is being the empathetic, caring person, and in his delivery, and actually, I just saw kind of I guess a leaked copy of him saying,
yes,
giving his speak. But before that, just the memo he gave to everybody couldn't be more empathetic and caring and benefits. And we're going to do this because I wonder if it wasn't for what happened with Musk just a few days ago, he would have done that thing. I don't know, because I think how Musk handled it must have freaked everybody out at Meta, saying, no, you got to really plan this out. You cannot do this helter skelter. You have, because look how much heat Musk got for just like firing people and then say, oh, come back.
I mean, I have a funny story for you.
Yeah.
So, you know, growing up in school, I wasn't the most fit. And so PE was always a little bit of a nightmare. And, like one of the things that the task that we had to do was you had to basically like almost climb like a little wall.
Yeah.
It's like very similar to like what a police training exercise might
Right.
be. And I'm like, oh, I'm not the most fit, but like
Yeah.
I'm tall, I'm scrappy, I can probably figure it out. And what I did was I just decided to like sit back and see all the other like the more athletic, the like smarter kids go in front of me and see how they like what techniques are they doing, right? What are they doing? What are the things that like people are failing? Like how are they like striking out? And so Mark Zuckerberg, he did layoffs quite late, right? Like there were so many other
Right.
companies that did layoffs before, and he was watching everyone else, or he had the benefit, or his team did, of seeing like what not to do. And kudos to him, right?
You got to give him
Because
credit, right? You got,
right,
even if you hate him, you got to give him credit for that. He really, it's interesting, that story, because it makes a lot of sense, because he's sort of like, all right, you don't do like better.com did, right? Where
right,
you call you call them dumb, his employees dumb dolphins and crazy stuff
right.
like that. You don't do one way Zoom calls and say you're fired. You don't cut everybody off on your, on your laptop and shut them out. So that he's smart, man. He's a really
Right.
smart
So
guy.
you saw all these like different things that
Yeah.
they did that were very unique to Meta, right? So even the people that were laid off, they still have access to their work email to the end of the day. That's odd. We
Yeah.
we haven't seen a company ever do that.
That's trust. That's trust that
That
they're,
is trust.
that's trust. That they're
The
not going to
second
do anything or
is
ruin anything.
like let's have these like killer severance packages because
Yeah.
Meta has more money than God. And so they
Yeah.
can't afford that. um they're doing the very similar to Airbnb of April 2020 of saying like, hey, we're going to have our recruiters support you find another job, train, help rewrite your resume, whatever career guidance tools. um we're going to create like an alumni network, right? Like they picked up all of these different
Yeah.
things that other companies did. And, I'm going to tease Twitter and Elon a little bit, but Elon Musk, this hits home to me personally as a PR person. But Elon Musk famously dislikes PR and communications.
Mhm.
Tesla famously doesn't have a PR team. And, any PR person, even a junior person, could have told him, hey, you need to have some internal communications about the layoffs. But Twitter had none.
None. It was a mess.
Absolutely a mess. And Meta, I suspect he saw that, and
Yeah.
Meta has a fantastic, great, large PR and communications team, and he leaned on their support. Like, how do we message this? How do we make sure we don't do a better.com, or we don't do an Elon Musk at Twitter? So that's why it's email and it wasn't during Zoom, right? Like there's all these like different cues and like things that, I mean, he's well coached. Credit to him.
Yeah. Now, for the folks on the site, but then also just at large, what, what would you suggest to them? Have there been conversations amongst themselves? Like, what do I do? Where do I go? Because, Salesforce laid off, Stripe laid off, Snap laid off, you Twilio, Lyft. I mean, you could go down the list and keep going. I had a list of it, but I didn't want to kind of, depress everybody of
Right.
all the different companies. So like, so if they're all going through that and have, not all, but so many are laying off and hiring freezes, what do you do? Like, do they have any ideas, any thoughts?
Yeah. So there's a big community on Blind that is saying like, hey, on paper, 4 months sounds great.
Right.
But if you think about 4 months, we're in November. That is just till March.
Mhm.
And a lot of the time in between is holidays, when even in good times, companies don't really hire.
It's slow. Yeah, I could tell you, right, doing this executive search, like
Right.
starting, as soon as we get closer to Thanksgiving and then through that holidays, it's like pulling teeth to get stuff done. Can you do it? Yes. And what I suggest people on Blind, get ahead of it, because that's kind of a contrarian thing. So if people watch this, I would
Mm,
say this: most people pull out. Put aside all the layoffs or the downsizings right now. Pretend that didn't happen. I would suggest you get ahead of the curve rather than waiting and just sitting around. You want to go out there because I bet most people are not. Most people say, F it. I'm going to wait for Thanksgiving, wait for the new year, wait for Christmas, wait for Hanukkah, wait for whatever, and just, come back whenever. If you get out there, there's going to be less competition. Even though there are more people out of work, I think a lot are just going to hang tight and just chill and just, do some self-care, do whatever. So get out there, get your resume updated. Definitely get in touch with recruiters that specialize in your space. Maybe hit up some career coaches, resume writers, hit your network, your alumni. Just take action because a lot of people are going to be like punch drunk. Like, what do I do? And just be like, just shock. But just you process it, take some time, process it. But then you got to leap into action because if you leap into action, you're going to be ahead of the curve. And then you also have to be positive because what happens is this: if you go and you interview and you're kind of bringing that baggage with you, like, I can't believe I got laid off. My boss is a jerk. I was like the best. I was this. It does not go well. You know what? You just got to be like, hey, let's say you're an interviewer, Rick. I'll be like, hey, I was laid off, but I really love my time with Meta. It was great. I learned a lot. I made so many acquaintances. I just feel so fortunate. I get the market situation that I was laid off, but that's fine because now I'm excited. I get to interview with a company like yours and I get to meet with people like you. And if it wasn't for the layoff, I probably would just stay there another 5-10 years. So maybe that was the kick in the pants for me to take action. And maybe, you know what? I was thinking of doing a startup. So maybe this is the thing I needed to get the courage and say, you know what? I got severance. I got some money. I'll team up with some other people from Blind, pull it together. Maybe we'll do something cool. So you want to have that attitude. It's too easy to get, bummed out, depressed, feeling bad. And don't get me wrong, it's going to come and you're going to feel it, but you have to fight against it. And I don't mean to preach to you guys in saying this, but somebody got to say it. You know what I mean? Yeah, I feel,
Right.
most people might say, take it easy. Don't worry about it. Enjoy yourself. Go to the beach, take a trip. I'm saying, no, don't listen to them. Take action right now. Take control of your life right now.
I mean, maybe I have a funny story to share with you, but and I kind of want your advice here,
Yeah.
but I almost dare say, like, to try to keep yourself positive, don't even mention that you're laid off, right? Like,
No.
chances are, if your resume says Twitter and the end date says November 2022, I think everyone knows what happened there.
Right.
It almost doesn't need to be
You know
said,
what? You don't
right?
even actually have to put the end date right away because if you're still kind of, some of them, like if they leave you on
Oh,
for a while. So if they're leaving you on,
oh.
you can kind of you kind of leave it, for a while until like you hit it. You don't want to lie, but if like because some places keep you, you know what I mean? Like they'll say, okay, you're
Oh,
still kind of here, even though you're not here. So yeah, you could kind of do that.
oh, so the expert tip. This is why
Yeah,
you
well,
listen to this
yeah,
podcast.
yeah. Because it is a weird thing because then they don't ask that, oh, so what happened, oh, because then the conversation goes all about the downsizing instead of who you are, and you don't want to have that conversation. You want to have the conversation
Ah,
about moving forward and being positive, not having the interviewer feel sorry for you. You don't want that. You want to be like, hey, I'm glad to be here, I'm excited about this job, this is fantastic, and not talk about any of the negativity of the downsizing, the layoff. Put that all behind you.
interesting. Yeah, because maybe it's because the tech industry tends to be pretty insular, and I'm a hiring manager at Blind, and I come across quite a few resumes, and as I'm reading them, I'm like, oh, I know exactly what happened here, right? Like, like there's things that like line up, right? Like, last year there's like someone from Better, and I'm like, oh, I think
I
I
know
know what
that.
happened
Right,
there.
right.
Twitter right now, Better right now,
Yeah.
Stripe, like whatever, right? Like, I think people know, and so it's almost not worth it, right? And even as a hiring manager, as an interviewer, I know it's sensitive. I don't even want to like touch it, right? Because
Right. Because that they know that
yeah,
and they know that so it's like, what, like, let's not even go there. Like, we all get it. We don't have to talk
right.
about it. Yeah.
Like, let's just you know chin up, move
Yeah.
forward, right? And so, like, why are you excited about working at Blind or working at whatever going ahead?
Would you suggest, or what do you hear from the people on Blind that they want to get the same job somewhere else, like doing the same software engineer, or are you feeling some people are starting to say, you know what, maybe I want to pivot to kind of something a little different, or maybe I want to go to a smaller firm, or maybe I want to go to Wall Street, or maybe I want to go, wherever. What are you seeing? What are you hearing?
Yeah, we don't necessarily see as much of the like switching
Yeah,
functions or job functionality. If anything, it's kind of the opposite where, these recent layoffs, a lot of the headline numbers, they sound huge, but when you look at tech roles like engineering, product design, they are in the minority of people that are being laid off. Like those bulk of this like large numbers, the headline numbers we see in the news, they're coming from what I call like business roles,
yeah.
right? So it's the marketing, it's the sales, it's the HR and recruitings, it's the operations side. And some layoffs, like those business roles can be 40-50% of the actual, count that's affected.
Can I
And
say
and
something that's going
so
to get me a lot of hate?
uh-oh, yeah, let's go for
So
it.
I've been doing this because like I'm a really boring guy. So I'll look at LinkedIn
Yeah,
where people post the banner, that green banner that says, open to work. Because I'm
right.
curious to see if I could kind of, use some data analytics, but like squishy, because I'm not really crunching numbers, but I'm kind of just processing, right? And you're exactly right, dude. The ones who I see who are let go, whether it's Gem or Stripe, or you like any of these kind of startups, Twilio that have been hit, the vast majority are like contractors for sure. The ones who
Definitely.
like short term, boom, they got crushed. Like Apple got rid of 100, contract recruiters.
Right.
So like, yeah, the recruiters, the contract recruiters, contract anything, boom, they're out. Then I notice this is where like I don't want to be insensitive, but I notice like a lot of these jobs where when I look at their background and resume, their LinkedIn profile resume, not so good. They're not
Right.
so good. It's kind of jumpy, kind of whatever. And it looks like places like Meta may say, hey, we need some help. We have, like you said, more money than God. So, you know what? Let's bring this person on, give that person a shot, in this kind of role. But if they have to leave, it's not going to be so bad. It's not going to really impact us. So you're right. Yeah, it's interesting. It's
So if we see any kind of like switching job functions right
yeah,
now, it's from these business roles where they're thinking, okay, like I still want to work in tech,
yeah.
or like this layoffs, like these entire teams of engineers or product managers, they're still there at the company. And so if they start going and trying to figure out, all right, how do I learn how to get into product, or how do I learn how to code? And so, if anything, we're seeing more of the kind of business side try to get into the technical side. We're definitely seeing a lot of folks considering different industries and company stages, right? So, with your total compensation, your TC down because of these like huge stock market plunges, like in some cases, it makes sense to go to, uh, a so-called tier two company, right? Like maybe you're not going to consider Uber, but you're now going to consider Lyft,
Mhm.
or you're not going to go work at like a Google or Microsoft. Maybe you're now open to a DoorDash or something similar, right? Where they're still big, they still have restricted stock units that are basically liquid, right? So that necessarily doesn't change. You still get the support of a huge, large name brand company. We're also seeing kind of people go the extra mile and say, "Oh, you know what? I'm willing to do the startup gamble. Maybe I can get like these like stock options. Maybe they're lotto tickets,
Right.
right? And maybe they'll like work out for me."
Well, doesn't history show that some major companies started during recessions, right? I
Right.
forgot those, but there's like an amazing number that really that started because exactly what you're saying, where they're like, all right, you know what? I have some money, I saved some money. Let's say, the folks on your site, So if they're bringing home three, four, five, six, seven, 800,000 a year, right? And
Yep.
hopefully they were being, smart with their money, investing it. Hopefully they didn't invest it in FTX, because that's, maybe we could just talk
That,
before we end this, just
yeah, that's out. Yeah.
and so let's say you were smart and put some money away and you saved it. All right, yeah, let's do a startup. Do you think also would they move to like where maybe they didn't want to go to a financial services firm or a hedge fund or a private equity, or just like a, kind of old school blue chip company, and say, you know what, if I'm not getting that big juicy RSUs or stock options, all right, maybe go somewhere. And I was writing about this too. Maybe something boring and safe for a while, like to move over and go to like, I don't know, what's, maybe it's not as sexy, but you don't have to worry. I mean, is
I,
that an
I
option?
I mean, sometimes it scratches my head, like what qualifies as sexy nowadays, right? Like DoorDash is sexy in some circles, but it's a food delivery app, like I'm okay, that's fine. Stripe was like the most popular
Yeah.
unicorn pre-IPO company, but it's literally like payment rails and processing. Like
Dude, that's what always tries. It's someone who's outside looking in at this world. And now I'm kind of learning a lot. It's like, we're changing the world. This is amazing. I'm like you're an insurance company. All right. I mean, that's important, but that's not really changing the world. I mean, it's
right.
important. So, like, yeah, why not say, like, all right, let me go to whatever ABC widget company. They're really cool people there. They're going to pay me a lot of money. I'm going to, I looked at their balance sheet, I did my homework on them. They're really safe and sound. And I could ride out this, bad time and get paid well and not stress out. So, I
I
mean,
mean,
is
we're
that
we're
an option?
seeing we're seeing people
Yeah.
on blind. It's really funny to me because maybe it's because I'm on the business side. I'm newer to the tech industry, but we're seeing folks on blind discover like, oh wow, like freight and logistics is really sexy actually because everyone needs it, right? And the pay in some for some companies can be just as high as Meta, Google, whatever. You have these hedge funds that sometimes pay more
You can make
than
a lot.
Google,
These
right? They
absolutely.
want these like quant trading, this high frequency trading, those kind of
Absolutely.
things. But that's the most boring thing ever, right? It's a finance
It's what?
trading things at fractions of a
But
penny.
if you have like a gambler's instinct, you would like that, because that's what it's all about. So if you like that, then you know what? Then it's like, oh wait, I'm not changing the world, but this is kind of fun. This is kind of cool. So yeah, so it sounds like, okay, you could do, maybe go to a hedge fund, a private equity shop, like whatever company.
Logistics,
Yeah,
defense is a big one that I think people sleep on.
yeah.
And those compensations, they don't blink when
Yeah.
you some of those companies when you ask for like a Google style salary, they're like, okay,
Cybersecurity, right? That's another area,
cybersecurity,
right?
exactly.
You know what it is? Because like I remember when you would see it in different periods. Like there was a time when I was going to school, like going to a big investment bank. That was the thing. That was the coolest thing. It didn't have to be Goldman. It could be whatever. But like that would be cool, and especially growing up in New York City. That would be like,
Right.
wow, that's what you aspire to. But then investment banks weren't as cool anymore. They were boring. Then you wanted to go to like a hedge fund, and then all right, hedge fund. Now you want to go private equity, and so on. So it always kind of changes what's sexy and what's cool and what's hot and what gives you bragging rights. So yeah, so maybe it makes sense for them to check out other areas too, right? To see, hey, let me see what else is out there.
I mean, Jack, I'll give you the San Francisco version. When I was in college, everyone wanted to work in biotech or
Oh,
health or a consulting firm. They wanted to work at like Bain or McKinsey or
McKinsey,
something
yeah.
like that, right? There was like this prestige associated with that. Like, oh, I have to go into this interview process and I'm like a junior in college or something, right? There's a cycle that goes to it. Like you have coffee chats before the actual interviews and all of these things. Um, and, and I always just like find it really funny, right? Where now it's like do people necessarily want to work in biotech, right? Like they're just fads that they
It
come and
does. It
go,
just goes, it goes in
right?
waves.
Like in New
Right?
York, it was banks, right? And now
Yeah.
it's hedge funds, and now it's probably fintech or something, right?
Fintech, right? So it's so like yeah. So I think it's really you also have to have one of those Venn diagrams. It's like, what are you good at? What do you like to do? Where you can make money, and then you find it, and then maybe you put aside, because I guess you get in that ecosystem. So if you're in that, like you're at Amazon, you're Apple, and then you go out, all your friends and former colleagues going to look at you like, why did you leave? Like, what's up? What's wrong? So it's hard. It's not easy to kind of do something different. But then sometimes stepping outside of your comfort zone, it opens up so many more opportunities, especially a time like this where you're like, maybe I should just kind of keep an eye open.
Right. I mean, there's I just say like there's so many different things that are going on, right? And so like one thing that I've learned from interviewing the dozens of executives, the CTOs, the heads of HR that we've had on this podcast is you have to really start from like first principles, right?
Mhm.
And that is just like looking in the mirror, looking at your resume, and figuring out what are your core competencies, but also what do you actually want to do? And to your point, like finding that Venn diagram where your skill set matches what you are actually interested in, what you really want to do, and really finding that middle spot, right? And sometimes, it could be me. Like I'll use myself as an example. Like I'm a good communicator. I'm a PR guy. I love talking, research, writing. Where's that Venn diagram? Maybe my next job is as a journalist. Maybe it's as a researcher, right? And so it's not necessarily like the high flying PR executive in tech, but it's something adjacent, right?
I think
It's
you're so
something that can
right.
be
You're so right because I believe this from placing people for so many years is that the ones who succeed tend to do what you said. You take a step back and say, what are my skills? What am I good at? Like what should I lead with? And what do I like doing? And then the people who are going from their strength of what you like doing, and then you enjoy doing it and you're good at it, you succeed because then you're happy. Like, you're doing something and you're like, I don't hate it. This is kind of, I get paid to do something I kind of enjoy. This is really cool. And then that kind of person keeps getting better and better because when you're in a work setting, they see, oh, Rick is really happy. He comes in happy. He's motivated. I want him on my team. You know what I mean? We have an
right.
opening. I want him to come here because he seems great. So then it's self-fulfilling. Then you're happier and you work harder because people appreciate what you do. So I think for a lot of people, maybe that's a good thing to do. You sit back and say, hey, do I really want to be a software engineer? Or maybe I want to go into management. Say, hey, you know what? I'm tired of just being, that kind of independent contributor. You know what? I'm ready to manage people. I like managing people. I manage, maybe as a coach in high school or maybe whatever it might be, and I think I would be good at it. I'm empathetic. I can motivate people. Let me go and do that. So yeah, I would encourage people to kind of take some time to really, like what Rick was saying, is to think, take some time and think, what are my skills? What am I good at? What do I like doing? What do I enjoy doing? And then you know what? This will sound corny, but then the money comes to you because you like what you do and you work hard. So it comes to you down the road because you're going to work hard at it. You're going to be good at it. You're going to excel. May not come at first, but then it does.
I mean, I'm a firsthand example of that,
Yeah.
right? Like I think very few people wake up as like a 5-year old and say, "Hey, I want to be in PR."
You didn't do that when you were
Right?
a kid?
No,
Like wake up, hey mom, I want to be a PR person.
yeah, like in college, I didn't go, hey, I want to be a flack, right? Like it's just
Yeah.
like that's just not on my radar.
Yeah.
But like I learned, like I went to college and I said, hey, I really want to be a lawyer. You know, growing up, I was the obnoxious kid that always tried to find like how can I break this rule, or like how can I go right up to the edge of this rule and just like poke your eye occasionally, right? And that's what a lawyer does, right?
Yeah.
They like understand what you can and cannot do. They interpret, and they kind of like it's like an unlocking function, right? That's all being a lawyer is. And so I went to college, took some classes at Berkeley Law as an undergrad, and thought, wow, this is a completely radically different way of thinking. I don't mind it, but I think I'd mind it if I were doing it 60, 70 hours a day, a
Yeah.
week, right? And then I realized, well, what are some like very similar kind of related things that I can do with this skill of, you know, being annoying and getting right up to the like, like being very detail oriented, we
Yeah.
could call it. And communicating. And I got into politics. And from politics, I was writing speeches, and that's communications. And then I got into PR. And so there was this like very long-winded career path, but it started from a kind of core place of I'm a people person. I'm also very like like detail oriented, and those were all like very needed kind of skills, whether you want to be a lawyer, a politician, a lobbyist, a campaign manager, speechwriter, PR person, writer, journalist, right? It's there's been this like nice kind of it's still a little bit linear, but kind of perhaps non-traditional career path. And eventually the money did find my way, right? Like,
Yeah.
gosh, my first job was what is it? Like I think I made $38,000 writing campaign speeches. So like those annoying flyers that you throw out like yes on D, I literally wrote that those bullets and stuff. Um I those the speeches for the union head
Mhm.
at a fundraiser, I wrote those, right?
Right.
And long hours in October, November, and in December you're home free, but um eventually I didn't have to work all those long hours, right? Or eventually I made more than $38,000 a year. It worked out, right?
And that's great advice because, for the people here, they may just say, hey, I'm a software engineer. That's all I want to do. That's cool. But I think
Fine, yeah.
it's helpful to just to throw out ideas because in a time of uncertainty, you just want to explore things and keep an open mind because you don't know how things play out. It could all turn around for the better and you're like, oh, why did I have to worry? Everything turned out great. Or it could be a long, bumpy ride. So this way, I think, what Rick and I are trying to do with these podcasts by bringing guests or having these emergency these emergency sessions. It's like to just bring ideas up. Now you could say you like them, some of you might say stupid or they don't apply, but you know what? By offering it, it gives you some ideas. It opens up some doors, and it can help. And I think in times like this, we all have to try to help each other because we're going to be going through tough times for a while. So I think if we all kind of pitch in and give whatever kind of things we could contribute, and I think for us, contribute, just give, the advice, garner from what we do for a living to give some color and context of what else you can do.
I mean, I think that's exactly right, right? Because it's very easy, to your earlier point, to get really frustrated and say like, man, I was laid off, or holy crap, Meta, like the most blue chip of the tech
Mhm.
stocks, is taking such a drastic action. Like I have no hope. But really, like no, right? Like there's no seasonality issue. Like there's still companies that are like scooping up, like drooling that there's now thousands of
Mhm.
folks that have Meta, Twitter, Stripe on their resumes that are up for grabs. Um, a lot of folks, there's like dozens, hundreds of referral threads being posted every
Yeah.
minute
See, isn't
on
that great? Like
blogs,
you see that all over the place where this is what I'm
right?
talking about, just trying to help everybody out, which is a really nice thing to see, because you don't
Right.
see that too often. Also, you see a lot of hate and anger. So it's nice to see, hey, look at this Excel sheet with, all these different companies that are looking, here's this Google Doc with people who just downsized. If you know anybody, help them, which is awesome. That's so cool.
It's also a sign of like not only are people that I know or strangers helping me, but it's also a sign of like it's market intelligence, right?
Yeah.
It's saying, oh, if they're open for referrals or they're taking referrals, they're growing, they're hiring.
Yeah.
Those are the companies that do not have a hiring freeze, right?
True.
Probably aren't going to lay off, at least not for a while. And so that there's kind of a shining light if you like read between the lines there, right?
That's a good point. And that's something that maybe the people they could kind of concentrate on, like, okay, let's maybe see, maybe some of the bigger ones are right now hiring freezes, what have you. But let's look at the ones who are not. But then I'll tell you this, the ones who do have hiring freezes, right? And the ones that, say they're laying off, I always find out behind the scenes, there's always some job open. And one of the like I find one of the best kind of tricks, I don't want to say tricks, but one of the hacks
Nice
is that
tricks.
you have to find somebody at the company who to kind of say, hey, Rick, I
Mm.
hear this software engineer position is open in this group. Hey, can you put my resume there and give a recommendation? Because that helps out tremendously. It's just sending your resume in response to an ad. It'll work, but it's harder. But if you can get somebody who, best case is someone internally, because people always love internal, referrals, because they think hey, if Rick is suggesting for someone to work, with him in the company, okay, I got to trust that because Rick is great. And if he's great, his friend is probably great. Let's bring him in. So yeah, you want to find that person at the company, and you want to make sure not only send the resume, share the resume, but they say really good, warm, glowing things about you. Then if you get a second person, check this out. If you can get a second person to do it also, then the HR person, whoever's like, oh my God, we
Really?
got two separate, strong recommendations for Rick. He must be amazing. We got to bring him in. So even when you see hiring freezes and even when you see layoffs, it doesn't mean that there are certain jobs that are like they call it the hidden job market that are there, but for whatever reason, they're not broadcasted, they're not online. But if you dig around, yeah. So don't get discouraged. If there's certain companies that your target company you love to work for, try to pinpoint who would be that hiring manager. Try to kind of look on LinkedIn and through your network, who do you think is that logical person that you would work for, or the HR person responsible for it, the internal recruiter, and just go boom, just target that person. And that person, I say, oh yeah, we do have something. Yeah, let me check it out for you. Now, is it probably harder given what in the context with all these layoffs? Yeah, but it's possible. Absolutely. I see it all the time.
Do you know, do you know what I suspect might happen at Meta? So you have this huge layoff right now, 11,000 across like different departments, right? Like I'm hearing Instagram, Facebook app, just a lot of different departments and business units are affected. But what I suspect is, they say that they have a layoff. They're doing a hiring freeze until 2023 next year. But I suspect maybe second quarter 2023, like that half year point, they're probably going to start hiring again,
Mhm.
and it's going to be in like Reality Labs, that metaverse unit,
Yeah.
right? It's going to be these new initiatives that they really want to like double down on, really want to invest in, really want to start building. And we're going to look back now and say, huh, 6 months ago, 7 months ago, they had this layoff, but now they're hiring again, right? We
Yeah.
see it all the time. We even saw it with Twitter, right? They laid off and they had some kind of like
Oops.
regret,
Oops.
right? It's the next day and they're like, oh crap, I shouldn't have let Jim go, or like Jim's team go, and now I have to go and see if he'll come back, right? And so we see this all the time. Like initiatives change, what is right for the company is very context and time specific. It's not necessarily kind of, I see this a lot on Blind, like, oh, this company did a layoff, maybe their future isn't good, maybe that industry stinks, maybe they aren't doing as well as everyone thinks, right? But then you start to see like, no, maybe it's just specific to that
Yeah,
context, and they're going to hire again next
absolutely.
quarter, next year,
Yep.
right?
And to your point too, I think what happens with some of these layoffs, when you see like a Meta and others laying off, it gives you cover to get rid of the dead wood. And again, this people are going to hate my guts, but like but I feel the value I add is just being transparent from what I've seen over the
Oh
years.
yeah.
And so I think what happens is you get cover. So let's say you're ABC widget company and you have a lot of like subpar performers, people who are put on pips, people who whatever. This is your excuse to get rid of them because like you could just say, oh yeah,
Right.
layoffs,
Cynically. Yeah.
layoffs. And so that also muddies the waters where it makes it look worse. But I think a lot of it is just an excuse to get rid of people who you always wanted to do, but you couldn't get rid of them, and now you can't.
I mean, it's also not necessarily an excuse, right? Like
Yeah.
coming from my PR background, like the art of the news dump is
Mm,
real, right? Like you have the classic is the Friday news dump. Like Friday afternoon, I'm going to announce my bad news. All the reporters are out on the weekend. No one's going to care. Everyone is not going to read it, even if it's online, right? So we have that classic trope
mhm.
within PR. And you have the same thing. Like if I'm a tech company and maybe I was going to lay people off and maybe I was going to announce it next week or, next month. Oh, everyone, all the tech reporters are going to focus on big old Meta and 11,000.
Right.
And I can announce my layoff
You just
now.
squeeze it in again under the
You
radar.
squeeze it in. And you know what? So, Blind, we track layoffs very closely. And that's exactly what happened. This
Oh,
morning at 3 a.m., when the email went out to Meta employees, all of the articles hit. And later that morning, you started seeing companies like Redfin laid off about 800 this
right.
morning. You saw
I didn't see it.
Kabam,
Yeah.
right?
I didn't see it.
You- We saw
Yeah.
Kabam, a
Yeah.
video game company, do some layoffs. There's all these like different companies that are trickling out. And I mean, I'm gonna tease you, Jack, but
Yeah.
thanks for proving my point.
Yeah.
Like
That's
you didn't see it, right?
no, I didn't. Because like I was focused on the yeah, sure, look at this,
Gotcha.
look over here, and don't look over here. Don't look at this side. Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's and so like I mean I bring that up as an example to say like, hey, that is a PR tactic that some companies use. Perhaps they were going to lay off next week, next month, tomorrow. Maybe they were going to do it the same day. You don't know, but it's very context specific, and it's not necessarily anyone's fault, right? It is just like situational, and you can't really like cast a judgment about a company or an industry. Certainly cast judgment on the executives and leaders that are making these decisions that led up to this point. Certainly do that, but don't be quick to just like knock out like, oh, Meta's a goner,
Yeah.
or the metaverse is a stinker. I mean,
I mean,
it
Meta's
could
still a
work out.
cash cow. It's a cash cow. I think the PE, last I saw, it's like I don't, really super low. So I
Oh,
mean,
really?
it's still generating tons of money. Yeah. So you're right. You're absolutely right. It's like it's just they spent a lot on the metaverse, but aside from that, they're still killing it.
Yeah, I mean, do your research, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna be the boring guy that says that, but I think that's what's really interesting. Right now, in times like this, it's very easy to just make these like instinctual, like it feels good to just be like F tech, right? Like I'm
Mhm.
just gonna avoid tech entirely. Um, but no, there's some pockets there. And even within an industry, just because, let's say like Lyft did a layoff, Uber could be doing really well. You just really have to put yourself out there, do the research, talk to the folks that are working there, go on blind. It's an easy way to kind of figure that out, what people are talking about. Um, you know, and do the research, go on the Google Finance, right? Figure out the PE ratios, kind of learn how to figure out like, oh, they actually have like $1 billion on the cash, in cash in the bank accounts. Like, wow, like they're probably not going to go out of business, right? Like all of these different things can help you make that decision, right? Whether it's to apply for a job, accept an offer, make a move, right? I think there's certain uh, big group out there that's, their company doesn't have a layoff. Maybe they feel insecure, secure about their job. Like now could still be a
Mhm.
good time to make a move, actually.
Absolutely. That's great advice. And yeah, I hope, people who watch it will kind of get this up and ready for tomorrow too, because they need to hear some positivity because, the mass media is just always negative, it's going to just the drumbeat of negativity. So they need to hear, some positive, encouraging, stuff. So I hope that this was helpful for everybody.
Thanks everybody for tuning in on this
Thanks.
emergency podcast.
Thanks.